It was the image that turned sympathy into scorn. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, stepping off a sleek private jet, sunglasses on smiles, polished with the sun gleaming off the aircraft's metallic skin. Within hours, it was stitched side by side with a chart pulled from Centabel's most recent financial disclosure, a chart that showed that travel and administrative costs had exceeded program spending for the third quarter. Overlaid across both, the hashtag that would come to define the fallout, not Diana's way. What began as a quiet transition, Prince Harry stepping down from his long-held patron role at Centabale, the charity he co-founded in 2006 to support children affected by HIV/AIDS, in Lesotho, erupted into a firestorm. Officially, the departure was framed as a natural next step in Harry's evolving philanthropic focus, but leaks from within the organization painted a very different picture. Anonymous sources cited a bitter rift between Harry and Dr. Sophie Chandoka, the respected chairwoman who had served as the charity's moral compass for years. According to insiders, Sophie had grown increasingly frustrated with what she called a celebrity-first culture that valued branded photo ops over meaningful engagement, perfectly captioned social posts over measurable impact. Yet it wasn't just internal disagreements that caught fire, it was the paper trail. The charity's recent filings revealed glaring issues, multiple missed report deadlines, errors in financial summaries, and most damning of all, a disproportionate chunk of funds going to non-programmatic costs, logistics, branding, international travel. Critics online were quick to note that Centabale's actual field support in Lesotho had seen a noticeable drop while Harry and Meghan's appearances had not. One tweet read, "They're showing up to be photographed, not to serve." Former volunteers came forward anonymously, describing a culture where substance was often sidelined for aesthetics. "We were told not to focus on the work, but on how it looked." One wrote on Reddit, "Even when Harry visited, it was tightly scheduled, around drone shots, media angles, and quote opportunities, not real engagement." The timing of it all couldn't have been worse. Harry had long positioned Centabale as a living extension of his mother's legacy, a continuation of Princess Diana's hands-on, humble approach to humanitarian work. He'd spoken at summits, appeared in documentaries, written heartfelt op-eds, but now critics said that legacy had been weaponized for optics, not honored through action. The press, even usually sympathetic outlets like People and The Guardian, didn't hold back. One headline read, "From royal responsibility to vanity project, Centabale under fire." The late-night comedy circuit followed close behind with monologues mocking the Sussex's platinum-tier charity tourism model. Still, the most ominous noise wasn't public, it was institutional. Several major donors, upon seeing the numbers, quietly requested clarification from the board. Legal experts began debating whether mismanagement had crossed the line into negligence. And amid the noise, Harry's camp broke its silence, but not with accountability. A short statement released through the Archewell Foundation blamed selective media framing and expressed disappointment in the erosion of journalistic integrity. It said nothing about the financial discrepancies, nothing about the complaints from staff, nothing about Diana. The response, lofty, vague, polished, only fueled the backlash. But the real shift came not from the tabloids or the donors or even the furious volunteers. It came from the one woman Harry had brought in himself, a figure seen as fiercely loyal to the mission and now utterly disillusioned. And when Dr. Sophie Chandoka finally spoke, not through leaks, but directly, she didn't just confirm the scandal. She tore apart the myth that had once protected them. For weeks, the scandal around Centabale had spiraled without a clear face, accusations flared, social media erupted, and public trust bled quietly into silence. But everything changed the moment Dr. Sophie Chandoka stepped forward. In an exclusive interview with The Times, Sophie, a trained physician, longtime HIV advocate, and the chairwoman Harry himself had personally endorsed, dropped the mask of royal deference. Calm, measured, but unmistakably firm, she dismantled what remained of the Sussex's protective narrative. There was a time, she began, when Centabale was about the work, not the photos. Somewhere along the way, that shifted. Sophie described a gradual but undeniable pivot: meetings, deprioritized in favor of PR scheduling, field visits shaped by drone camera angles and pre-approved media packages, and perhaps most damning, a proposed rebranding initiative from Meghan Markle herself. According to Sophie, Meghan had privately floated the idea of resetting Centabale's identity in early 2024, removing its African-centric legacy and focusing on broader global youth empowerment, a move Sophie resisted fiercely. It felt like distraction, she said, a way to outrun the accountability already catching up to us. But nothing hit harder than the numbers. In a confidential board memo, now circulating among donors and later leaked to journalists, Sophie laid out the shocking disparity. In Q2 of 2024, Centabale had spent more than £312,000 on international travel, media consultancy, and event infrastructure, while less than £140,000 had gone to field-based programs in Lesotho and Botswana. Nearly 70% of those travel costs, according to Sophie's footnotes, were connected to 3 multi-day trips involving Harry and Meghan, including private jet legs, bespoke media teams, and luxury accommodations booked under the guise of strategic engagement. One particularly inflammatory data point included side-by-side screenshots, a viral image of Meghan stepping into a luxury vehicle during a Nairobi stop, juxtaposed with an internal email requesting budget cuts for a local HIV testing center. Former staff corroborated the pattern. "We were encouraged to think in terms of aesthetics," one ex-communications officer shared under condition of anonymity. Instagram engagement media-friendly captions curated narrative. The field teams were often sidelined. Even their reports were rewritten to sound more brand positive. Meanwhile, volunteers told of being brushed aside when raising concerns. One recalled suggesting a reallocation of funds toward mental health programs for HIV-affected teens, only to be told the story wasn't visually strong enough. And yet, amid all these accusations, the most chilling detail wasn't financial, it was emotional. Because alongside the board memo, another leak surfaced: a chain of internal emails between Harry and senior snowballed staff dated just days before his resignation. In them, Harry didn't demand audits, accountability, or even clarification. He demanded silence. "We must control the narrative," one message read. "Do not engage media. Do not confirm or deny anything. This is about protecting the brand, not validating gossip." And then in a separate email reportedly sent after Sophie expressed discomfort with this approach, "If this story gets legs, it won't be because of our mistakes, it'll be because we let it." That one-line cold corporate emotionally disengaged spread across social platforms with frightening speed. Screenshotted, shared, quoted under headlines like "the brand over the mission." Within days, the hashtags evolved. "Not Diana's Way" became "Prover People." Late-night shows picked it up again, and a former royal biographer issued a statement that landed like a knife. When Harry co-founded Snowballed, he said it was the cause closest to his heart, but his heart, it seems, now speaks in press releases. But if Harry's cold calculation shocked the public, Meghan's next move would ignite full-blown outrage, not for what she said, but for what she refused to explain. In the wake of Dr. Sophie Chandoka's piercing revelations and the leaked internal emails that cast Prince Harry as more spin doctor than humanitarian, all eyes turned to Meghan. There was still a flicker of hope among supporters, a chance however slim that Meghan would step forward, with clarity, ownership, perhaps even remorse. But when the long-awaited statement arrived, published exclusively through Harper's Bazaar, accompanied by stylized portraits of the Duchess seated beneath olive trees in Montecito, the tone sent a very different message. "It is disheartening," the statement read, "to see years of work reduced to bullet points and clickbait. We remain deeply committed to service, compassion, and the empowerment of underserved youth." No acknowledgement of financial discrepancies. No mention of Dr. Chandoka or the rebranding controversy. No reference to the travel budgets, the sidelined field teams, or the viral charts. Instead, it was a masterclass in elegant evasion filled with aspirational language, laced with emotionally resonant, yet ultimately hollow declarations. In the spirit of progress, Meghan added, "We look forward to evolving our approach to philanthropy in a way that reflects our values and protects our peace." Protects our peace. The phrase trended within hours, not as a celebration, but as satire. Social media erupted not with applause, but with scorn. "Millions mismanaged, and your takeaway is protecting your peace." One tweet read, garnering over 50,000 likes, "That's not damage control. That's emotional deflection in designer shoes." Publications that once tread lightly around the Sussexes shifted tone overnight. The Atlantic ran a scathing editorial titled, "The Gloss of Empathy, When Image Outruns Impact." Even The Cut, which had previously given Meghan one of her most sympathetic interviews, reposted the statement with the caption, "The Art of Saying Nothing." But perhaps the most damning shift came not from critics, but from once loyal defenders. Commentators who had once praised Meghan's resilience and reinvention began to question whether the reinvention itself was the problem. "What happens," wrote one activist journalist, "when transformation becomes so polished, so curated, that it erases accountability altogether?" The timing only deepened the wound. August marked the 27th anniversary of Princess Diana's death, a moment that typically saw tributes from Harry, poignant memories of his mother's compassion, humility, and hands-on approach to service. But this year, the contrast was too stark to ignore. Side-by-side comparisons flooded timelines. Diana embracing patients in AIDS wards, sitting on the edge of cots, her face inches from suffering, versus Meghan, polished and distant, lit perfectly, speaking of empowerment without naming a single affected child. And then came the meme. An AI-generated image, now viral, showed a fictional side-by-side quote, Diana's "They need love, not pity," paired with Meghan's "We protect our peace." The image was fake, but the sentiment unmistakably resonant. The damage was no longer contained to Sentabili. It had cracked the Sussex brand at its core. Major donors began to reevaluate affiliations. The Archwell website, once a sleek archive of impact, was flooded with sarcastic comments and question-laden shares. Even Netflix, currently developing a project with the couple, reportedly paused promotional planning pending further reputational assessment. Still, Meghan's team remained unmoved, releasing no clarification, no follow-up. Some insiders claimed a strategy of silence, others whispered of a legal recalibration. But to the public, it looked like disengagement or worse, arrogance. And just when it seemed the silence had settled, a long-lost royal ally re-emerged not to defend Meghan, but to accuse her of betraying everything Diana once stood for. For a few days, the silence almost seemed strategic. Meghan's carefully crafted statement, vague, serene, untouchable, had drawn fire, yes, but the flames had begun to smolder into fatigue. Public outrage cycled as it always did. Hashtags cooled, headlines drifted. But then came the unexpected voice, and with it the scandal reignited, like dry kindling. Lady Sarah McCorquodale, Princess Diana's older sister and longtime steward of her personal legacy, rarely spoke to the press, but this time she made an exception. In a rare and unsparing interview with The Telegraph, Lady Sarah said what many had only whispered. Diana never wore her compassion like a brand, she lived it. And she never used service to protect her peace. She used peace to serve others. The quote struck like thunder, coming from a figure so directly linked to Diana's memory, so removed from media spectacle and tabloid chaos, it couldn't be dismissed as mere gossip or jealousy. This was not a royal feud, it was a family reckoning. Lady Sarah confirmed she had once supported Harry's involvement in Snowballed, even offering quiet guidance during the charity's early years, but she said she had grown deeply disheartened, watching the organization's shift into theater over substance. And she didn't stop there. She disclosed that the Diana Princess of Wales Memorial Fund, once a cornerstone of ethical philanthropy, had been approached by Archwell liaisons in 2023 regarding collaborative branding opportunities, a proposal she swiftly rejected. It felt transactional, she said, not transformative. Her words traveled faster than wildfire. Even before the interview's full release, excerpts spread across Instagram and digital front pages. Commentators who had previously tread carefully out of respect for Diana's legacy now spoke with unrestrained disappointment. The Daily Mail unsurprisingly ran the story with a brutal headline, "Lady Sarah Meghan has betrayed Diana's values." But even progressive outlets echoed the sentiment. Vulture called it the moral low point of the Sussexes' post-royal journey. As the fallout intensified, another wave hit late-night comedy turned savage. On Last Week Tonight, John Oliver featured a segment titled The Humanitarian Hologram, skewering the discrepancy between Meghan's philanthropic rhetoric and Sentabele's spending reports. "It's like if your therapist spent more on her office plants than on your sessions," he quipped. But sure, it's about protecting peace. Meanwhile, the hashtags returned, this time more caustic than ever. Charity facade, hashtag peace over people, had brand Diana broken. But perhaps the most devastating sign wasn't the backlash, it was the silence from allies. Oprah Winfrey, Ellen DeGeneres, Serena Williams, all notable supporters in Meghan's previous chapters, stayed completely quiet. Even People magazine, which once offered glowing profiles of the couple, turned off comments on Meghan-related posts for the first time in over a year. Then came the institutional consequences. One of Sentabale's top corporate donors, the African health investment firm Mavuno International, issued a formal ultimatum: disclose full financials from the past 18 months or forfeit future funding. In the same breath, they threatened civil action if transparency wasn't met within 30 days. That letter leaked within hours. As Meghan and Harry's team scrambled behind the scenes planning new messaging, exploring legal routes, and quietly contacting crisis PR specialists, the public saw none of it. What they saw was a monarchy-adjacent figure, a living embodiment of Diana's legacy, stating plainly that her sister's mission had been distorted into performance. And now, with donors turning hostile, allies evaporating, and Diana's own family drawing a line, the Sussexes face their hardest question yet: can their brand survive a scandal that calls into question the very soul of their mission? The days that followed were quieter, not because the outrage had disappeared, but because something deeper had settled in its place: disillusionment. The Sentabale scandal had begun with numbers and photographs, misallocated funds and missed reports, but it had evolved into something heavier, something more intimate, a question of integrity, of whether the Sussexes had ever been who they claimed to be once the cameras were turned off. For Prince Harry, the fallout struck deeper than reputation. Insiders close to the charity's early formation spoke to the pain of watching his passion project, built in the image of his mother's compassion, transform into a headline he couldn't control. The staff that once called him committed now spoke in past tense. The mission he'd once declared my life's work was now at the center of donor lawsuits and media punchlines. For Meghan, the cost was different, not legal perhaps, but symbolic. Her brand carefully cultivated around resilience, empathy, and female empowerment now seemed to buckle under the weight of contradiction. The woman once hailed as a modern Diana now found herself cast as her opposite, calculated image obsessed, out of touch. The optics that had once elevated her curated Instagram posts, pristine fashion moments, elegant sound bites now felt sterile, even performative. What should have been a turning point, an opportunity to own mistakes, to demonstrate vulnerability, and course correct became a masterclass in missed chances. No transparent apology was issued, no forensic audit promised, no live address to supporters, staff, or even the field partners in Lesotho. Just more controlled silence, more behind-the-scenes spin. The damage extended beyond Sentebele. In the months following the scandal, other charities quietly distanced themselves. Speaking engagements were postponed indefinitely. A planned joint appearance at the Global Philanthropy Forum was quietly removed from the lineup. Netflix, though not canceling existing projects, delayed their release calendar pending strategic adjustments. And among the public, once vibrant support turned into tribal division. Some still defended the Sussexes, fiercely arguing that the charity world is never perfect, that Harry and Meghan had done more good than harm, and that they were being unfairly held to impossible standards. You don't cancel people for imperfect execution. If the intent is good, one comment read, "They're human, not saints." The hashtag #teamreform emerged, pushing for transparency but standing by the couple's vision. Others were less forgiving. For many, the scandal represented a final crack in a long fraying narrative, a moment that exposed how carefully the brand had been constructed and how carelessly it had veered off course. They used Diana's name like a shield, one critic wrote, but when it mattered most, they chose silence. The viral phrase, "not Diana's way, refused to die," it became a symbol of everything the public once hoped for and now mourned. In the end, what began as a financial scandal ended as something harder to fix, a collapse of trust, of narrative, of myth. The Sussexes are not banished, not erased, not even finished, but they are changed, no longer the untouchable icons of progressive royalty, but something more fragile, people with legacies under question. And now the story belongs to the public. What do you believe this scandal represents, a harsh lesson in public accountability or an overreaction to imperfect but well-intentioned leadership?